Hello. So I wanted to start off with a trigger warning. At some point, I will be talking about suicide in my discussion post. But let's get started. I was fascinated with the very first article that I read about staring. It's a topic that I've always wondered about. I've always been fascinated with this idea of staring and it not being okay to stare. Um, and I've always wondered, because I'm a people watcher, I love to watch people. I've always wondered, how do we do it respectfully? Also, I'm going to keep looking down at my notes so I don't forget anything. But I always wondered, how do we do it respectfully? Because as a kid, I was taught that it was incredibly rude to stare, which I find very interesting because as kids, that's how we learn the world around us. That's how we understand differences and similarities and mannerisms and behavior and um, things that we might like or not like. So, um, for kids to be told not to stare, um, it's not something I taught my kids. In fact, I was the complete opposite. I taught my kids that it's okay to see people because exactly what I said, we're looking for similarities, we're looking for differences. And if you're curious about someone, that it's okay to go up and ask them if you can ask them a question. So we've done that before where a gentleman, he was using a wheelchair and my kids were curious about it. So I went up to the gentleman and I asked him, I said, sorry, do you mind explaining to my kids why you're in a wheelchair? They're curious. And he was more than happy to share. Another time, there was a gentleman that had a yarmulke on, and so I asked him if it would be okay if he could explain to my kids why he wears a yarmulke and the religious significance behind it. So my kids have always been taught that it's okay to ask, but always ask their permission to ask. Um, so I consider myself, I self-termed it a sociological starer, because I like looking at people from a sociological standpoint. So I pay attention to things like hair, clothing, accessories, mannerisms, people's facial expressions, their mood, responses, their interactions with other people, their behavior, what they're doing. Like, I look at all of that and I love to study people, so I can understand why people do what they do. Especially when you're looking at it from a cultural aspect or a religious aspect or in different settings, like an airport versus maybe a religious setting, a synagogue, or being out in the grocery store versus a mall, being at the park, things like that. Um, so being this starer, which typically I am, it can be uncomfortable, especially if you get caught, because I always, again, wonder, how do I do this respectfully? Um, so when I get caught, I try to play it off. I smile. I try to mouth hi, or if I'm close enough, I'll pay them a compliment. Being the starey, so in the article, Sontag says talks about repulsive attraction, and that is something that I think people, when they look at me, that they're like, oh my god, she's so ugly, or what the hell is she wearing? Excuse the language, but what is she wearing? Because I'm not a fashion person and I just wear what's comfortable. Also, I always get weary about men staring at me, because I've, as women, we are highly sexualized. Also, I wear a lot of Black Lives Matter type of shirts, and so I get stared at a lot because of that, and I get a lot of dirty looks, and sometimes I get a lot of compliments too. My daughter has challenged me, and I'm not comfortable doing this, but she will stare people down. If they're staring at her, she will look them straight in the eye, and especially men, and she will stare them right back until they back down. Um, Me, I'm not comfortable with that. So, so I've always wondered too if, that's why I'm so uncomfortable with eye contact, is because of this whole notion that staring is bad. Um, so here's my trigger warning. So the book, regarding the pain of others, they were talking about how people look at pictures of suffering and dead bodies and why people do that. And I remember, so a person I was dating, they had killed themselves in front of me. they shot themselves in the head. And when I went downstairs to meet the ambulance, there was a news station there, and I was so angry and so upset and so hurt. I'm like, I am dealing with somebody who I loved just killed themselves in front of me, and you're at my house trying to capture this moment. It was just so disgusting. And then I think about all the times that we're engrossed in TV watching tragedies unfold, which brings me to the bad stare of people just being curious and not having empathy around the pictures or the images that they're seeing. I think of police violence against Black bodies and how people will watch that just to get pleasure out of seeing a Black body beaten or killed. Um, and you think of how Blacks are portrayed in the media and in movies, and so it gives that persona that it's okay to kill them, they're thugs. It's very intentionally done. Um, Versus how white people are portrayed in the media, especially, a white person that just murdered their family and, oh, they were a doting father. Um, Anyways, I digress. Also, I think of nationalism and war, how they vilify those being killed. It condones the killings of those people. The good side of steering with political action and mobilization. So I'll bring up Black Lives Matter movement that came up. Philando Castile. I remember first seeing him being murdered in front of his girlfriend and his daughter. Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old, that was shot by police within 10 seconds of the police pulling up on him in a park. And he had a fake gun, a toy gun. And then, of course, we all know George Floyd, that happened. So that revolutionized the Black Lives Matter movement. And so that's where those pictures and those images, why we need them and they could be helpful. Anyways, I went way over time, so I'm going to stop here. I had a little bit more to share, but I'm going to stop here. I hope you all have a great day. Thanks.